In the war-struck territories, dark forces are taking over, while the common citizens are unaware of what is coming. Philo struggles to believe it and meets Vignette in the city once again. The series begins when the entire Berg territory is occupied by the Pact Republic. They are tyrants, and from the Anon city, Vignette runs toward the ship along with many innocent children and women to leave the war behind. However, along the way, a large military camp of the Pact detects their movement and begins to follow them. They are numerous and kill all the females and children in their path by shooting them. In the end, Vignette manages to reach the edge of a cliff and saves her life by flying toward the ship using her wings. It has been many years since Vignette has been helping people escape Anon, but now she asks the captain if she can leave the city forever. The captain retaliates and refuses to take her along. She must pay for the journey, but she does not have the money. They argue, and suddenly the Pact forces attack their ship. In a hurry, the captain tells his men to lock her in the lower part of the ship. Before leaving, a man gives her the address of someone she wants to search for in Rome. She watches a picture of a man sitting in the ship, and when a girl asks who he is, she sadly tells her that he was a soldier who died in the war. She misses him, and at the same time, water begins to flood the ship. Despite Vignette pleading for them to open the lower part, no one listens. Everyone traveling on the ship drowns in this tragic incident. Meanwhile, the man Vignette saw in the picture is Philo, and he is alive. He serves as an inspector in the police department. He hates it when his department's men harass roadside sellers. He punishes one of his own men and then goes to meet the victim of an unknown attacker. Magritte shares that she, too, is from Anon, which is a beautiful valley. Philo admits that he was there once, and the memories of his time spent there are priceless. Later, he asks Magritte to tell him any details that could help them find the unknown attacker, who strikes a new victim every few weeks. She tells him that she only knows the attacker was bald, had some beard on his face, and a tattoo on his wrist. She prays that Philo finds the person he lost in Anon. A few of the Row residents see the shipwreck near the sea, and among all the corpses, Vignette lies alive but unconscious. Then she opens her eyes. On the other hand, Breakspear and his rival politicians present their agendas to improve the condition of the city. The argument ends when the rival leader silences Mr. Breakspear by taunting him, asking if he has passed a law forbidding citizens from engaging in illegal relationships with prostitutes. That angers Mr. Breakspear, who returns home angrily, where his only son, Jonah, comes back in the morning after spending the previous night in a brothel. He stops and warns Jonah that he will ruin his future, but when his mother intervenes, Jonah tells him he knows he will have a shining future. Meanwhile, Philo meets his friend from Anon, who works as a prostitute to earn her living in Rome. She is terrified that a brutal murderer is roaming freely and that it's only a matter of time before he attacks again. Philo tries to assure her that they are doing everything possible. He shares that a shipwreck was found on the seashore, but he doesn't know about any survivors. At the same time, the only survivor of that ship, Vignette, is taken to the police station. She explains that she paid to get there, and even then, she was kept incarcerated. The policemen do not believe her and tell a companion to find out who registered this ship and that Vignette should be sent to the ship's owner soon. Meanwhile, Imogen looks outside the window and discovers that someone is moving into the house next door. She is excited to know who the new man in town is. At the same time, two policemen arrive to ask for Mr. Spun Rose, who is Imogen's brother, Ezra, the ship's owner. They take him with them and ask what type of business he was conducting with the ship. He shares that he invested most of his inheritance in the ship and was about to receive a share of the profit when it returned. But they tell him that the only thing that has returned is this girl named Vignette, whom he can take along as a housemaid. Imogen is thrilled to see the new maid in her home. After the maid gives Vignette clothes that belonged to the previous maid, Imogen tells her that she will only grant her 1 day off a week and that she needs to pay special attention to cleaning her nails before serving tea. Imogen tries to touch her braid, but Vignette hesitates and says it is a special thing that reminds her of someone. On the other hand, Philo embarks on the mission of finding the mysterious attacker again. Passing among the protesters, he reaches a sergeant whom he suspects might be the murderer. He asks the sergeant to show his arm so he can see the tattoo, but the sergeant refuses and taunts Philo about his unnecessary attachment to such people. He reveals that he knows Philo was in love with a non-human species and understands that such feelings can arise when one can't find a real woman in the whole town. That angers Philo, and he punches the sergeant in the face. Tired after a day of struggle, Philo returns home, where Mrs. Fee serves him and the landlord dinner. Mrs. Fee's husband was a soldier, and it has been 7 years since he returned, so she works as a maid in this house. She spends the night with Philo and asks him what sorrow burdens his soul. She wants to know because he looks so sad. He reveals that he has done something in the war that he should not have done. Upon Mrs. Fee's insistence, he refuses to share any details of the story. That night, the maid in Imogen's house gives Vignette a robe that ties her wings tightly behind her, so she cannot escape or roam in the city at night. She has no chance to leave the house, so the next day, Vignette drains Imogen's favorite perfume in the washroom. Imogen loves it and wants it done, so she sends Vignette to Roe to refill the perfume. The perfume is special and so powerful that it attracts any man toward her. She wants to hurry as their new neighbor will be here anytime soon, and she wants to marry a wealthy man. As Vignette walks down the street, she reaches the hotel where she meets her friend. She shares that she has helped many people escape Anon for 7 years. This last time, Pax soldiers killed everyone she was supposed to send on the ship, so she decided to leave finally. Her friend sees Vignette's braid, which she has grown as a reminder of Philo after his death. But her friend reveals the truth. He is alive and working as an inspector in this city. Philo grows increasingly anxious as he cannot find the killer. He asks his officer for permission to search the policeman for the tattoo, but the officer refuses to grant it. Angry, Vignette cannot accept that Philo escaped after deceiving her about his death. All the Berg people usually cheat Anon residents, but she won't let Philo forget what he did to her. As soon as Imogen confirms that the new owner has arrived next door, she quickly goes there with her brother. But all her excitement fades when she discovers that he is half animal, half human. That night, Jonah invites Vignette's fairy friend to spend the night. But as soon as he falls asleep, someone wakes him up and kidnaps him from the room. On the other hand, Philo searches for the killer in the local pub and suspects one of the policemen as he matches the description of the attacker. As soon as Philo uncovers the man's forearm, he sees a tattoo that confirms he is the mystery killer. When Philo tries to arrest him, the man runs out of the bar and Philo follows him. He crosses every hurdle and jumps across the roofs to reach the man. However, the man stops at the edge of the building and says that he only wanted to stop the dark forces working underground. Those who come from darkness have exceptional powers. They need to be stopped, but no one is ready to prepare for the upcoming disaster. As he says this, he jumps off the building and dies. That night, after making sure Imogen has gone to sleep, Vignette removes her corset that has tied her wings and flies through the city to search for Philo. Meanwhile, Philo refuses to spend time with Mrs. Fye that night, as he is disturbed by witnessing a suspect commit suicide. When she asks him about the ache in his heart, he refuses to share. Later that night, Vignette searches and enters Philo's house with a knife to kill him. She holds the knife to his throat and demands to know why he lied and fled without telling her. Philo tells her that he did not want to break her heart and that she can kill him if she wants. But she begins to cry and cannot bring herself to do it, so she returns home. That night, a woman finds a flute among the shipwreck and stands at the edge of the tunnel. Suddenly, an inhuman creature appears and pulls her into the tunnel while she screams for her life. Vignette returns to Imogen's home before anyone can discover that she fled the previous night. She has tears in her eyes and leaves the knife in Philo's room, which he picks up and safely keeps in his drawer. Mrs. Fee is hurt too and behaves formally. The first thing Philo learns at work that day is that the killer has killed another person, a fairy, and a singer. Parts of her remains are scattered everywhere, and Philo sends a few men through the tunnel to find traces of the killer. Later, he goes to the residence of the victim. She lived an average life, despite being a rich and famous singer in her youth. Suddenly, they discover a man hiding in the closet, claiming he too is an artist like Ashlyn and just arrived to meet her. Philo warns him that he can't leave the city until they find the murderer. The head maid scolds Vignette for deceiving them, as she knows that Vignette escaped from the house last night. Vignette pleads with her to keep this a secret as she fled to find her old friend in the city. But the head maid assures her, with hatred on her face, that she will never try to meet her friend again. At the same time, Imogen calls their lawyer to take action to make the new neighbor leave the neighborhood. as she dislikes him. However, Mr. Visby tells her that he can't evict an owner from his own house by any law, so it's better if they learn to ignore him. The next morning, the prostitute does not find Jonah sleeping with her and becomes so angry that he escaped without paying her. However, since his clothes are still there, her guards inform the police of Jonah's disappearance. Meanwhile, Jonah is sitting, afraid and naked, in a hall, and his father assumes that someone has kidnapped his son for ransom. He gets angry at his personal guard, who failed to fulfill his duty, and fires him. Imogen looks at the artist on the roadside who is performing with the kobolds. She scolds Vignette for being a bad maid, as it is about to rain and she hasn't brought an umbrella. As soon as Vignette runs to get the umbrella, the rain begins. Imogen requests everyone to share their umbrellas with her, but no one does. Finally, her new neighbor, Mr. Puck, saves her from the rain by taking her under his umbrella. She expresses her hatred, and he angrily tells her that he knows why she wears that specific perfume. It's only to entice any man who comes close to her, and he knows its lustful ingredients as well. He tells her that she doesn't need to wear it to attract any man. Imogen cannot bear to hear anything more, and walks away. On the other hand, Philo wants to get permission to investigate the brutal murder of poor singer Ashlyn, but his officer refuses. He takes a pug doctor with him to examine Ashlyn's corpse, and the doctor shares that the woman was around 90 years old and had been stabbed with full force in the ribs. Also, her liver is missing. Philo often visits his friend in jail, and today he shares the mysterious details of the murder. Meanwhile, Ezra tries to assault Vignette while she works in the kitchen, but she pushes him away. When Imogen arrives after hearing the noise, he accuses her of stealing money and decides they can't keep Vignette in the house. Moreover, he tells her that for theft charges, he will call the police to arrest Vignette. So she silently approaches her friend and tells her that she will work there to pay off the money she owes Ezra. But her friend has a better idea: to introduce Vignette to Black Raven, a group that puts obstacles in the government's work as they demand their equal rights. On the other hand, Breakspear's wife brings an old fortune teller to help them find their son. He does not want to believe, but his wife insists, so the fortune teller asks Breakspear to sacrifice the most precious animal in the house. Breakspear is reluctant, but sacrifices his most beloved bear. Afterward, the fortune teller reveals that someone very close to their family has kidnapped Jonah. Vignette's friend takes her to Black Raven, who demands that she complete a difficult task to test her loyalty before allowing her to join their group. She is asked to bring the government's flag from Cambrai in front of all the police. Philo overhears someone saying that a pixie fairy has broken the agreement, and they are here to file a complaint. He becomes alert, thinking it could be Vignette. After confirming, he rushes to the Spun Rose house and pays Ezra the full amount to free Vignette. Imogen is unaware of what her brother did and resists, but Ezra signs the paperwork. Philo now has an idea of what Ezra would have done to her and assures him before leaving that he knows. Imogen complains about freeing Vignette, which angers Ezra. He complains that she spends a lot of money on clothes and lifestyle, while they have nothing left because he invested all their money in the ship, and his investment drowned with it. Imogen is devastated, realizing she trusted her brother and he deceived her. Now he plans to get a loan from the bank for another investment by mortgaging their house. Meanwhile, the fortune teller lied to Mr. Breakspear about sacrificing a valued thing at his wife's request because she hated that bear. In fact, she kidnapped Jonah. On the other hand, Imogen feels that she should invite Mr. Puck for tea after her conversation with her brother. She receives a message from him that he will happily join her the next day. Vignette takes her friend to the hall and flies into the air to get the flag, while her friend distracts the police. They run after her as she flies away with the flag, but she bolts the door. On the other side, Philo sees her and stops her from stealing the state's flag, but she does not listen to him and flies out.